Hi, this is Jen Rubin, and this is Jen Rubin's Green Room. We are at an inflection point, I think. On Monday, Donald Trump will have to come up with $454 million or so in order to satisfy the bond and take his appeal in the property misevaluation, fraudulent evaluation case in New York. He has completed, as of today, his deal with Truth Social. So in a board controlled by him under circumstances that we don't quite understand, he should at some point have access to a pool of money. But whether that is available now or whether he can use that as collateral to get someone else to put up the money for the bond is unclear. But what is perfectly clear is Donald Trump is a walking, talking national security risk. Aside from his already compulsive adulation of people like Putin and the North Korea dictator, he very well may now be in bed with foreign players or even domestic players who are going to try to extract whatever they can get from him if he becomes president. So if we thought the last Trump term, when he raised some $7 million at least from just a limited list of foreign entities who showed up at his hotels and used his services. If we think that was bad, can you imagine what a second term would be like? We wouldn't know the number of people who had their hands in his pockets and who would compel him to dole out all kinds of favors. Could be financial, could be tax favors, could be foreign policy. If you had to dream up someone who was a national security risk, you would say, well, first of all, you can't have anyone who in the past had mishandled national security secrets. Ding, of course he did at Mar-A-Lago. You can't have anyone who had nefarious connections with foreign governments. Ding, you got that one already. You can't have anyone who is in dire financial straits. Ding, you got that one. And you can't have anyone who is essentially a disloyal, compulsive liar. Ding, you've got that. If he were anyone else, you wouldn't trust him anywhere near any national security secrets, any enforcement mechanisms, anything having to do with national security. But that's who Donald Trump is, and he will be a menace should he ever get back into power. So if there weren't reason already to vote against him, because he's in favor of a national abortion ban, because he has instigated a insurrection, because he declares war on democracy, you would think that this might give some people pause. But of course, his truly devoted followers will never be disaffected. For whatever he does, it somehow gets transmogrified into a completely clever, wonderful scheme by Donald Trump to impress his followers, because he can do no wrong. That's the nature of a cult. Meanwhile, what's going on in the world? Well, the situation in Israel has not gotten any better. And in fact, it has become such a source of frustration for the administration, the American administration, that they are actually sponsoring a resolution in the UN Security Council, unusual, calling for a direct ceasefire, declaring that there should not be a Rafah operation, declaring that more has to be done for the humanitarian relief of Gazans. This is a sign that the administration is just really fit to be tied. And that same sense of frustration you see in an interesting new poll from Pew. It essentially shows that the American people don't like anything that's going on there. Yes, Americans, by and large, still favor Israel. Yes, by and large, they acknowledge that Israel has a legitimate interest in defending itself. And there's even a plurality that thinks that they're conducting the war in an appropriate manner. But there's no particular glee in what is going on. Substantial numbers of people either don't know or have mixed concerns, or who, frankly, are more sympathetic towards the Palestinians. That's certainly the case of young people. So I think the frustration that the administration feels, and that our other European allies feel, and that the Israeli people feel, is certainly shared by the general public here. And in Israel, let's not forget, Bibi is overwhelmingly unpopular. He's got about 15% support. And every weekend, you now see these rallies that not only call for a ceasefire and for more attention and concern to be paid to the hostages, but that flat out demand that the current government hold new elections. They want him out of there. Now, truth be told, he can't be forced out, and he probably won't be forced out so long as the war is going on. So this drags on and on. But does this really affect the election? Is this really going to play a factor in the upcoming election here? It's really, I think, questionable. For one thing, if you believe in polls, and you all know I really don't, there's been a whole string of polls that show Biden actually improving his position since the State of the Union. So that suggests it hasn't really registered. And I would come back to a basic truism of American politics. Foreign policy does not determine elections. Sometimes I wish it would. Sometimes I wish that the American people would say it's entirely unacceptable to have someone who favors Vladimir Putin over Ukraine. But in point of fact, most people, understandably, vote in their own self-interest. What's this guy going to do for me? What kind of a country are we going to have? How is my financial wherewithal going to be affected? So I think in the larger scheme of politics in the United States, this is not going to play a determining role. Meanwhile, Republicans in Congress, as we sit here on a Friday afternoon, are scrambling to keep the government open. But of course, they have not yet put on the floor of the House a measure to extend aid to Ukraine. Now they are acquiring signups for a discharge petition, which would get a funding mechanism to the floor. They don't have enough votes yet. They may get there. But it just goes to show how completely clueless, how completely irresponsible the Republicans are. Ukraine is literally at a breaking point. They are running out of ammunition. They are running out of supplies. If we don't keep them going, they will fail. Russia will prevail after all of this time, after 2 years. And yet you have a group of people who not only don't want to do that, but there's a substantial group of Republicans who don't want to keep the government open either. Again, if we get anything done, if we keep the government operating, if we get Ukraine its aid, it's going to be because of Democrats, responsible Democrats. So it's not a pretty picture. And I think you have to return to a basic truism about American politics these days. It is very hard to keep a rational, democratic, productive, functional government if you have one party that's gone nuts. And we really do. We are a government that has divided power, has checks and balances. And given the fact that the American public is as divided as it is, there's no one party that's going to carry the entire load of governance on its back. There are too many ways to delay, too many ways to trip it up, too many ways in which the president doesn't exercise complete authority. And of course, the House now is in Republican hands. So I think in order to get back to the point in which we don't have this daily trial of craziness, this ongoing fascination with a cult of personality on behalf of millions and millions of people, you're going to have to see defeat after defeat for the Republican Party. And that's what you have Liz Cheney and some other Republicans calling for. She has come right out and said, we cannot have a Republican Congress. We cannot have Donald Trump in the White House. And what I've called for, and I hope this comes to fruition, is that she get together with a whole fleet of Republicans who have served in the Trump administration. You have people like Jim Mattis, you have McMaster's, you have Bill Barr, you have John Kelly. All of these people know he's unfit. All of these people know he is disloyal to the United States. And you really need them to band together in a critical mass to go around the country to explain to people, particularly weak Republicans, particularly people who think, oh, he won't be so bad, or business people who think, oh, I really could use some more tax cuts, to explain to those people that it's completely untenable to have someone back in power. Look at the havoc he rains down on the United States when he is not in power. Imagine him back in the White House. Imagine him really giving the green light to Putin to invade Europe. Imagine the abject corruption that will take place. Imagine him once more trying to institute a Muslim ban, rounding up undocumented immigrants. We're talking about chaos. We're talking about lawlessness. We're talking about a constant disruption of functional government. And that's simply not acceptable. And I will say this about these business folk who think, oh, well, he won't be so bad. We really don't like having to pay any taxes. We really don't like having to convert to green energy. It has always been this way with fascist regimes. The business community invariably tries to cut a deal. They delude themselves into thinking that democracy is irrelevant to their business operations. They just need unbridled capitalism. But in fact, what they rely on is the rule of law, is stability, is an international world order that is controlled not by Russia and China, but is controlled by a legitimate post-World War II agreement on which the rule of law, in which the sanctity of borders is preserved, in which there is free exchange of trade. They conveniently forget these things in their quest for the immediate satisfaction of another tax break, of another deregulation proposal. And so you have people running around who say, well, Trump would be just fine, or don't believe what he says. Just remember that you'll be better off financially. Well, in the end, they'll neither be better off financially, nor will the country. And the willingness to sell down the river democracy, the rest of the country, for the sake of some ephemeral economic benefit, which is not going to transpire because chaos does not allow for it, has really become, I think, a constant theme of the business community, of the wealthy in the United States. They have a huge stake in Donald Trump prevailing because they figure, we'll always be able to buy our way out of any trouble. So what if people get deported? So what if enemies get imprisoned? So what if people lose health care? For them, it's always a nice day when you have one of your own in power ready to give you what you want financially. And that is the great danger. And this has always been a danger in American politics. And it's more dangerous now than ever because we have such great accumulation of wealth in such a few number of people. So when you hear the ongoing cry that, things were so much better when Trump was in power. Really? We had higher unemployment. Really? We had lower growth. Really? Don't you recall March of 2020? We were all hiding in our homes. The economy had come to a grinding halt. We were headed for a recession. People's memories are weak because they want to believe, because they are trying to justify doing something that they know is not only morally wrong, but dangerous. So you're going to hear a lot of people over the next few weeks, few months, talking about how things were so much better. Don't you wish you were back in the glory days? What glory days? There were no glory days. So I think we have to keep our heads on and our spirits high. It's going to take a lot of work because the American people are disengaged, have short memories, are busy with other things, don't necessarily think in terms of democracy and the rule of law. So that means those people who are informed, those people who are attentive to the needs of democracy, to the stability of the American experiment, need to make sure that they're active, that they vote, that they encourage others to vote, that they give their time and their money to causes that promote the rule of law and democracy, so that we'll live to fight another day and we'll have future elections. Because if we don't, this will be the last election that we have. So something to think about. So if you enjoyed this program and you enjoyed our other programs, please tell your friends. They can click right there and they can follow us, subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever they get their podcasts. Bye-bye.